Yeah, so Ralph Gigante and his brother Vincent, both boxers, they both grew up in the village. They were both managed by Tommy Ryan. Vincent turned pro when he was 16, round about 16, right, 1944. 4 years later, Ralph followed in his footsteps and started fighting professional also. And Vincent the Chin, after Tommy Ryan's death, Vincent the Chin became the boss of the Genovese crime family. And Ralph was always just underneath, just in the shadows.
Well, Ralph was kind of a street guy. He met with the runners who were picking up numbers. They were all over the place picking up action, and they used to report to him. And there was a lot of number action at that time on the streets. So yeah, he used to pick up the runners and pick up their work. He kind of, it was at the bidding of either Mario or Chin.
The way I heard him described and seen him described in the papers was that he brought in money to the family. 1961, they had the basketball scandal. 22 different colleges were involved in a point shaving scandal. Most of the reports seem to implicate Vincent the Chin as being involved, maybe even to the point of being a ringleader. Ralph Gigante's name pops up too, late 1962. There's articles in the newspapers showing that an attempt was made to extradite him. It was unsuccessful, but at the very least, where we know that he was thought to be involved in the case.
He looked a lot like Chin, and I think the order was Mario, Pat, Chin, and then Ralph. My guess is he was probably about maybe 2, 3 years younger than Chin. They kept an apartment upstairs over the triangle where they used to go for meetings, and if they were talking privately and they didn't want anybody else in on it, they would go upstairs. Ralph used to cook up there on a weekend when there was not a whole lot going on. Uh, Sometimes you could go in the triangle and one whole wall would be like a buffet of trays of different kinds of food, from sausage and peppers to ziti and lasagna and and whatnot, clams on a half shell. Uh, but there were maybe 20 dozen out there because people would come in, eat, and run. And that was what it was for. It was for the neighborhood people or anybody else who wanted to come in and eat. Uh, they had a good meal there, let me tell you. Ralphie did all that cooking, yeah.
Ralph was a welterweight, and he did fight in the Garden a couple times, which was a big deal back then, right? Making it to the Garden. And he fought on a Kid Gavilan undercard. He fought on the Lee Oma undercard. And he also fought on a Tony Pallone undercard when Pallone fought Patty Young. He was managed by Thomas Eboli, who was known as Tommy Ryan, right? And Tommy Ryan was, um, I don't know what his rank was at that time, but he started working with Lucky Luciano. So he had about 10, 15 years in the organized crime. Um, he was always involved with boxing, though. First as a boxer, and even his street name, Tommy Ryan, he got after the former welterweight and middleweight champion, Tommy Ryan, from the turn of the century.
When you looked at him, you'd say to yourself, "This guy looks like he was a fighter." His nose was kind of. Uh, I probably had it broken a couple of times, and he had the look of a boxer. I had no idea though that he was. I'd never heard my father talking about him. It would seem logical that he managed him as well as Chen.
Around the corner from Tony Pallone was the Gigante family. And Vincent and Ralph got into boxing. When I used to talk with Pallone, he used to mention how Vinny the Chin and his brother, Ralph, used to box on the undercards. They used to go to Stillman's. What I could gather from the reports was that he was a counterpuncher. And the one report that I saw where they went into a little bit of detail, it was an undercard fight, but they said that he countered they described the other guy as the aggressor, and they described Ralph as countering him and sidestepping him. So looked like at least on that night, it seemed like he was more of a back foot fighter, which was the opposite of Vincent the Chin. The Chin used to come at you. Ralph had footwork. It sounds like. I don't know how much of a prospect he was, but he looks like he could hang with club fighters, and that was a big deal back in the 40s and 50s.
Mario, Ralph, and Vince were always together in the neighborhood. I've never seen them not be close. Let's put it that way. They were always either in the triangle or around the neighborhood somewhere, a restaurant, a bar, meeting people, talking to people. My guess is that they were very close, and I've seen them interact a little bit with their brother Pat, who was not involved with them, but he used to come down to the neighborhood there. I met him a couple of times there. Nice man. Assuming that all three of them were made, I mean, they're guys that demand respect. So they're not going to do anything in public that would jeopardize that position.
So word on the street is all the Gigantes knew how to handle themselves, even the priests. They all knew how to hold their hands. They knew how to watch for a punch and throw a punch. So Ralph was a welterweight. His career was very short, just under 12 months. He had, according to Boxing Rec, 14 fights total, 9 wins, 3 losses, and 2 draws. His pro debut, according to Box Rec, was against a guy named Lenny Holton, who had 37 fights at the time. About 6 fights in, he's fighting a guy named Tommy Mack, who had a record of 25-10 at the time. He won that fight, 6-round decision. He fights Tommy Mack weeks later, August and September. They fight to a draw. He loses. In November that year, he fights a guy named Sonny Levitt, who was 21-4 at the time with a draw. And Sonny, if you look at Sonny's record, he had just come off fights against guys like Roger Donahue and Tony Gennaro. And we know Tony Gennaro was a top-notch contender almost from the beginning. Roger Donahue was a solid top 10 fighter. He had a short career. He gained more notoriety later on. One of the inspirations for Marlon Brando's character in On the Waterfront. From his record and the opponents, I think that, and the fact that he was only stopped once and how frequently he was fighting, I think it's safe to assume that he knew his way around the ring, and maybe with a little bit of pampering, who knows? Maybe he might have reached the top 20 or something. We don't know.